The Bioshock series is easily one of the best examples of narrative-driven shooters. Where first-person shooters now are all about war and gunplay, the Bioshock series was all about well-crafted narratives and extraordinary settings. For years I wondered when this would come to Nintendo Switch, so much so that I made it one of my yearly April Fool's videos a Bioshock Infinite port trailer. And now the collection is finally here. Is 2K's beloved series worth a dive on the go for the $49.99 price tag? Let's find out. There's a total of 3 games in this collection, consisting of Bioshock 1, Bioshock 2, and Bioshock Infinite. Additionally, the story DLC for these games are all included, so you're essentially getting everything you would need to experience the whole Bioshock saga from front to back on Switch. Starting with Bioshock 1, this was originally released in 2007 for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. Later on, in 2014, this title saw a release on iOS, but luckily for the Switch, this is a much better looking port. It doesn't have the full 4K 60 performance of its PS4 Pro or Xbox One X counterpart, but the texture upgrades are here along with the dynamic 1080p resolution in dock mode and dynamic 720p in portable mode. As for performance, you can expect to see a mostly solid 30 FPS with the dynamic resolution occasionally dipping, though not too often. Considering this is the oldest game in the series, it doesn't surprise me how well this looks on the Switch. The atmospheric tones of the environment look great, with the people of Rapture being as creepy as always. Bioshock 1 takes place in 1960 and has us play as Jack, a man whose plane crash lands in the ocean near a lighthouse. This lighthouse takes Jack to the underwater city of Rapture, a world not dictated by human morality, and thus science prevail without any safety repercussions. As a result, Rapture discovered Adam, a material that grants those that take it supernatural powers, although at the cost of its users going insane and leading to the city's destruction. Bioshock 1 felt like a mutation of the System Shock series, hence the name. It combined first-person shooter gameplay with elements of stealth and an RPG system. Using a combination of weapons and plasmid powers, we fought our way through Rapture to try to escape. Throughout the journey, I came across splicers who went insane looking for Adam, little sisters looking to collect Adam, and their biologically enhanced bodyguards known as Big Daddies trying to stop me. As both a port and a game on its own, Bioshock 1 holds up quite well. Its gameplay felt ahead of its time in 2007, and while some new elements in its sequels made it arguably better, it still holds a warm place in my heart for one of the most gripping stories in a video game. If you've somehow managed to stay spoiler free from the series, I can't recommend diving into it blindly enough. Bioshock 2 was released in 2010 for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. Much like the Bioshock 1 port, Bioshock 2 sees a dynamic 1080p in dock mode and dynamic 720p in portable mode with 30 FPS across the board. Visually, the game looks good, though there are some artifacts in the darker shadowy parts of the visuals. In some instances, it made looking around in the dark hard to navigate, but it wasn't too much of an issue. This game takes place 8 years after the events of the original Bioshock. Rapture is now a destroyed, faded image of its former self after a civil war between the powers at hand broke loose. In the Rumble, we play as the first bonded Big Daddy who's been separated from their former little sister. In the years past since the separation, a new power has taken over Rapture, and the once little sisters are now big sisters, almost like parallels to the Big Daddies. Bioshock 2 has us go through a dystopian Rapture in search of our long-lost little sister. Its gameplay was similar to Bioshock, though with the addition of more plasmid powers and weapons that fleshed out the combat. Using both at once in the body of a Big Daddy provided some interesting new combat mechanics along with a new perspective that made for an interesting story. However, much like how Batman Arkham Origins is looked at as compared to the rest of its series, this entry in the series is looked at as the odd one of the bunch for not being directed by Kevin Levine, who originally crafted the Bioshock story. Although I acknowledge Bioshock 2 as the weakest entry in the series, it's by no means bad and stands on its own as a solid entry in the series. It originally featured a multiplayer mode, though that's been scrapped for this remastered release. Bioshock Infinite is the last entry in the series and arguably the most impressive of the ports in this collection. It was originally released in 2013 at the tail end of the PS3/360 lifecycle. Like the previous releases, Infinite isn't just a straight port of the original, but features better textures and lighting effects. If anything, it's more apparent in this case as Bioshock Infinite is the most colorful of the 3 games with a brighter color palette across the board. The presentation on Switch is downgraded from the PS4 and Xbox One ports of course, but the end result is still impressive for Nintendo's portable device. Bioshock Infinite runs at the same resolution as its predecessors on Switch. However, I did notice that the game dropped to lower resolutions more often in portable mode. Framerate dips were a bit more common too, though not enough to make this game unplayable by any means. It was a more stable performance than something like Doom on Nintendo Switch. What stood out most to me with this port's performance was the abundance of pop-in. Multiple times while running through the city of Columbia, I noticed objects popping in at the corner of my eye. It was a bit distracting at times, but not enough to break the experience. Bioshock Infinite takes place in 1912, before the events of Bioshock 1 and 2. We play as Booker DeWitt, a man that's tasked with going to the Sky City of Columbia and bringing back a woman named Elizabeth who's been kept in the tower for her whole life. Its story is the most complex of the three, and though it does get a bit convoluted at times, I'm a big fan of where it takes the series. Its gameplay, on the other hand, differs from the rest of the series as the most traditional first-person shooter. You still have a mix of gunplay and superpowers, although things move at a faster pace. Skyhooks have you quickly moving into the sky, platforming around buildings, and in general fighting off more enemies at once. Where the rest of the Bioshock series didn't feel as much as a traditional first-person shooter, Bioshock Infinite went back to that mold a bit. While I personally didn't mind it much, playing it now on Nintendo Switch, I feel like the faster paced gameplay could have benefited from gyroscope controls. It's a feature missing on all three games in this collection, though I think Infinite could have benefited from it the most. Hopefully, it's a feature that gets patched in through an update. Ultimately, the Bioshock Collection on Nintendo Switch is a remarkable experience. The Bioshock Collection is arguably one of the best series in video games, and to have it readily available on Switch feels like witchcraft at times. The performance of these ports aren't the best way to play, of course. I don't think anyone ever expected that. However, what the Switch does offer is a great compromise of performance for portability without ruining the experience of the collection. The biggest and arguably one of the only reasons to perhaps not pick this up for Nintendo Switch would be its controls and its price. Most of the Bioshock collection is over a decade old at this point, and the $49.99 price tag on Switch does feel a bit steep when you can pick up the same collection on Xbox One or PS4 for $19.99. The added portability is fantastic, though I don't think it justifies that $30 price difference entirely. For those that have never played the Bioshock collection before, it's a more worthwhile purchase considering all the games and DLC you get for the series. For those looking to double dip, it's still a great port collection on Switch, though you might want to wait to get this on sale, especially since you might want to get a microSD card for these games.